Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining today's session. That's our second session for the day. So, to all the ones who have joined our previous session delivered by Ben Dechrai, thank you all for joining once again for this session. So, this is going to be our last session for today, for Saturday. And talking a bit about this session, so it's again going to be very much going to be interactive and it's going to be delivered by a person from the industry. So, let me just introduce you to our today's speaker. So our today's speaker for this session is going to be Vaidhyanathan, and he's currently working with TCS as a systems engineer. And he's also talking a bit about himself. Like he's also passionate software developer who always loves to learn new skills and apply them in building amazing products. So without wasting further time, let me just introduce, let me just call up our speaker on stage. He's here with us, and let me just add him to the stream. Hello, Vaidhyanathan, and thank you so much for attending. And we are going to have an amazing session today with you, and again a lot of insights into what does open source mean, what does GitHub mean, all these things. I think you are the best person to explain, and we are going to have learn a lot of new things, and a lot of we have 80 plus people live watching you. Okay, and I hope that you have an amazing session. So let me just pass it over to you, and now it's your turn. You take over the session, and let's start.
Yeah, thank you, Omkar. Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the introduction. So let me now just share my screen. So good afternoon, everyone. We are going to have an interesting and informative session on introduction to open source and GitHub. So without any further ado, let's get right into the session. So before we start anything, it's important to understand what we are going to learn and its importance. So first of all, we are going to discuss about open source and its importance in the software industry in general. Okay, so whenever you hear the term open source software, the thing that comes into our mind is the source code of the software is open to the public. And there are many more things related to that. For example, the software is released under a particular license by the software owner, and the users are given certain rights by the owner to change or modify, use or view the software source code for any purpose. So open source software is generally developed in a collaborative public manner. So various developers from around the world are involved in building a software project. So let us consider a real-time example and look at some of the open source softwares that we use in our day-to-day life. So we all know about Firefox web browser, Android operating system, VLC media player, Linux kernel and its distributions. These are some of the many examples of open source softwares that we use in our day-to-day life. So let us consider an open source program example. For example, you are all part of this DevIncept contribution program. So here three parties are involved. There is the contributors or the participants, the project admin or the program admin, and the mentors. So it is essential for these three parties to be involved in a collaborative manner for successful execution of the program and the tasks that are assigned to them. So it is very essential for them to be in a collaborative, to have a collaborative spirit rather than a competitive spirit. So that is something we are going to discuss in detail in the further slides. And one more important thing is that open source softwares are hosted using various internet hosting service such as GitHub and Bitbucket. So these are the most popular ones. So now that we have a basic understanding of what is an open source software, let us discuss about the importance of open source software. What makes it so much significant in the software industry and why it is so popular. So open source actually encourages innovation through collaboration. So various innovative ideas are come up through brainstorming among the developers, and they collaborate to work on a certain project by either contributing code or documentation or any other thing for that matter. So it will encourage innovation through collaboration rather than competition. So there is a healthy collaboration between the developers and other stakeholders that are involved in developing the open source software project, and there shouldn't be any competition. So that is the main motive. So that is the spirit of open source. So without open source software, many of the technologies that we know today wouldn't have existed. So as we saw in the previous slide, we use so many high quality open source softwares in our day-to-day life, such as VLC Media Player and Firefox browser, etc. that we saw in the previous slide. And the third and most important point is open source software is mostly high quality software. So since so many developers are involved from around the world in developing the product, and it's undergoing constant reviews and constant improvements is made to the project over time. So the end product of it will always be of high quality. So the bugs and other discrepancies in the software are removed over time, and more features are added, and then the quality of the software improves over time. So that is the major advantage of open source software. The fourth point is using open source software can help you minimize your expenses. You can save on licensing fees and maintenance fees. So whenever you use any proprietary software, then you need to worry about licensing fees and maintenance fees. Whereas in the case of open source software, you can highly minimize your expenses. So that is another major merit of open source software. The last and the most important point is security and transparency. So developers in the open source community are constantly reviewing code, building improvements, and closing gaps in security. So as I said, the software is undergoing various reviews, and feature improvements are happening continuously. So due to that, any discrepancy in the security of the product can be easily identified, because so many developers who are experienced are involved in building the product. So it will eventually help to close the gap in security, and the end product will be highly secure. So those are the importance of open source software. So next up, whenever we hear the term open source, only two things come to our mind. One is the developer community, and the second thing is the software and tools that are used for open source software development. So we have seen a bit about the developer community and how the collaboration happens. Now it is essential for us to understand the software tools that are used in open source software development. There is Git and GitHub. There are various version control systems or softwares available on the internet, such as Tortoise, SVN, Mercurial, CVS, etc. But Git is the most popular among the developers. So essentially what a version control software or system does is it will track the changes in a set of files that are involved in the source code development of the software. So whenever we develop a software, the code base or the source code is written in a various set of languages and technologies. So, and various files and directories are involved while creating the project of that software. So while doing that, it is essential for us to track the changes that are happening to the project time by time. So in order to do that, version control software such as Git is used in software development. Next up, GitHub. So GitHub is actually the provider of internet hosting for software development. So this software that is developed in your local environment has to be hosted on an internet-based hosting environment such as GitHub, where your repository will be connected to a remote repository that can be visited by all developers around the world. So that is the definition of GitHub, or what essentially GitHub does. So, and the primary version control system that GitHub uses is Git. So now that we have understood the difference between Git and GitHub and what they are used for, it's essential for us to understand about the applications or the various programs that support open source initiatives. So for example, various open source programs are conducted on a large scale such as Google Summer of Code, Summer of Code, Google Season of Docs, which is essentially for documentation, and then Outreachy, etc. So you can explore about all these open source programs which are conducted on a large scale to improve your open source stance, and also to improve your developer profile. So it will add value to your resume as well. So now that we have understood about some open source programs that are conducted on a large scale, it's essential to understand some basic Git commands that are used in general software development and also specific to attending some open source programs such as DevIncept contributions program. So whenever you start a project, and if you want to create a new local repository, you use the command git init. And git status is used for listing all the files that have to be committed or added. So suppose you have added all the files that you need to, have for the development of the project, then you need to commit all those added files. There is commit essentially means that you have to save the records to the permanent version history. So it's permanently stored in the version history. Now Git push is something which you use for pushing all the committed changes from your local repository to the remote repository. So now the meaning of all these commands will be more clear and evident when we move on to the hands-on session that we have soon. So Git log is something that's used for listing all the version history. There is all the committed changes that you have done into your repository. And then we have Git branch. So whenever you are developing a project and you are contributing to a remote repository that belongs to some other owner, and the repository that you have forked from them is there in your GitHub website. Okay, so whenever you are contributing to that, it's always necessary to create your own branch rather than directly merging your commits to the master branch. So that is used for safety. If in case there is some conflicts or some bad commits that have been committed to the repository. So if you want to create a new branch, you will write git branch and the branch name that you want to create. And if you want to delete it, you will add a tag that is -d to the same command. Then Git Checkout is used for switching between various branches. So we have various set of branches, like the master branch, which is the topmost or the central branch or the main branch of any repository, and the sub branches that you create in order to add a feature or to fix a bug or whatever it is. So those are the branching that is involved. Now, specific to some things that we do often is like pushing an existing repository from your local environment to the remote environment, or else the forked repository of some other owner that you have with you, and if you want to update that repository. So these are the two things that you often do during your open source program. So the commands that are listed here will be more clear if you move on to the hands-on session. So without any further delay, let's move on to the hands-on session. Okay, so let me open up my VS Code environment. So here, as you can see, I have created a directory named test. So this is just an empty folder right now. It has nothing inside it. So as we saw in the GitHub Git commands, in order to initialize an empty repository, you need to type the command git init. So what this will do is it will initialize a localized Git repository for you. So as you can see in the last line, it says initialized empty Git repository in this path. So now whatever changes you make to this folder will be tracked by Git. Each and everything that you do will be tracked by Git. So let me first add a simple file to it. Let's say sample.py. and let me just print hello world inside it. So I have added this file. So since we have initialized the empty Git repository, it has started tracking all the changes that we make to this directory. So if I hit the Git status, it will show that we have added a new file called sample.py, but it is not added to the staging area. That is, it is still untracked. So in order to add the files to the staging area, you need to type the command git add and the name of the file that you need to add. So here we have sample.py. Suppose if you are making changes or creating multiple files and you want to add all of them to the staging area, then you can do git add dot, that will add all the untracked files to the staging area. So if I do that, and if I check the status again, it will show that you have added it to the staging area, but you have not saved it or committed it. So in order to permanently register this in the version control history, you need to save the changes or commit it. So in order to commit, you use the command git commit, and a tag -m or a label -m is added. So what that means is it's a message that you're giving to the changes that you have made. So what I have done here is I've added a simple sample.py file. So I will say added sample.py. So it will show one file is changed and one insertion is done. So now if I check the status, it will show nothing to commit. So in the local environment, we have done everything that needs to be done. So now the repository is present in your local environment. So in order to push it to some internet hosting service such as GitHub, you need to create an empty repository on GitHub. So I have already created an empty repository on GitHub, so which is called test, as you can see here. So you can simply create an empty repository by clicking on this plus symbol here and clicking on new repository. It will ask you for the repository name that you need to give, and you simply need to click on this create repository button, and then your empty repository will be created on GitHub. So now you need to sync the local repository that you have in your local machine to GitHub. So in order to do that, so as you can see, the repository is empty here. So in order to push an existing repository from your local environment to GitHub, you need to execute a certain set of commands that I showed you in the presentation. So let me first copy the repo URL from here. I'll copy the repo URL, and then let me go to VS Code. And here you need to type the command git remote add origin and the repo URL. So what this means is, to the remote repository, you're going to add a stream called origin, which will have this empty repository link that you have created on GitHub. So it will link your local repository to the repository on GitHub. So after you execute this, you need to set the branch. So what this means is that you're saying that the master or the main branch is linked to that of the GitHub's main branch. So you're essentially creating the main branch and syncing the changes that happened in that particular main branch. So once you do that, the only thing that you need to do is push the changes from your local environment to GitHub. So in order to do that, git push -u origin and then main. So the changes that you have committed to the main branch will be pushed to the origin that you created here. That is the remote repository on GitHub. So once you execute this, it will show it has pushed everything to the remote branch main from the origin stream on GitHub. So if you go to GitHub and reload the page, you can see that the sample file that we created in a local environment is reflected here. So now the local and remote is in sync with each other. So that is how you push an existing repository to GitHub. Now suppose you are working on someone else's project. For example, in DCP, you are going to work on someone else's project that is present on GitHub. So the first thing that you will do is fork the repository and create a clone of it in your local machine. So, for example, let me show you here. So here there is a GitHub repository called naming cheat sheet. So I have forked it and I have created a forked repository in my name on GitHub. So after forking it, what I will do is I will clone it into my local environment. So for cloning it, I'll say git clone and the URL of that repository. So git clone and paste the URL of that repository. So if you do that, since I have already created the clone of that in my local environment, it shows that naming cheat sheet already exists. So when you are creating new, you need to execute this command git clone of your forked repository and paste that repo URL. So it will pull all those things into your local environment and you will have a clone of it in your local environment. Now, if you want to update the forked repository, now as you can see here, this branch is 29 commits behind the master branch of that original author of that repository. So in order to make my forked repository in sync with that of the original repository, I need to execute a certain set of commands. So you can see here, first of all, you need to check out to the main branch. If you have created a new branch of your own, first of all, you need to check out to the main branch, and then you need to add an upstream. And from the upstream, you need to fetch all the changes from the original repository to your local environment. And from your local environment, you will push those changes to the forked repository. So let us do this step by step now. So as you saw on GitHub that my forked repository is 29 commits behind. That means the original repository is 29 commits ahead of mine. So I am lagging behind. So in order to update my forked repository, what I will do is, first of all, okay. So as I said, first I need to check out to the main branch, main or the master branch. So I'm already on the master branch. So now I need to check what are the remote streams that are available. So I can check that by using git remote -v. So that will list all the streams that are present. So only origin is present now. So if I want to add an upstream, then I will say git remote add upstream, and I will paste the repo URL of the original repository. So I will go to the original repository and I will copy the repo URL and then I will paste it here. So now if you check git remote -v, it will show the added upstream that will link to the original repository. So after you have done that, you need to fetch all the changes from the remote upstream into your local environment. So in order to do that, you execute the command git fetch. So it will fetch all the remote changes and it will collect all the remote changes and will pull it into your local environment. So we will do that step by step. So first of all, git fetch.
Vaidhyanathan.
Yes.
Yeah, can you whatever you are coding, can you just zoom into it, because a lot of people are not able to see what you're coding. So maybe you can please zoom and it would be give them an insight, because it's appearing too small.
Okay. So is it okay now?
Yeah, it's perfect. I think everyone can just type in the chat if it's perfect. If you can see what he's coding, so you can very well understand. So please type it in the chat. I think this looks perfect for me. Like when
Yeah, okay.
it was a yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So as I said, since the upstream is now perfectly ready and it links to the original repository, so we will fetch all the remote changes from the upstream. So in order to fetch that, we will execute the command git fetch upstream. So once you do that, as you can see, it will fetch all the remote changes. So once it has fetched all those and it is in the
Vaidyanathan, I cannot hear you. Hello? Yeah, I cannot hear you. Just check your audio.
hello.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Continue.
Yeah, okay, cool. So now we have collected all the remote changes. Now we need to merge it with our um, local version. So in order to do that, we will execute the command git merge upstream master. So it will merge all the collected changes from the remote and it will merge it with your master branch of your local repository. So once you execute this, you can see that there has been changes in readme file, and there's an additional file called funding.yml that has been added, and my repository was lagging behind. Now I have updated all those changes and have pulled all those changes into my local environment. Now if I still move to my browser and check the local repository, and if I reload it, you can see that still it is 29 commits behind, because I have pulled all those changes into my local environment only, and I have not pushed those changes to the forked repository of this thing on my GitHub. So now in order to push all the changes from my local to this forked repository on GitHub, I need to execute the git push command. So this will push all those changes. So as you can see, it has pushed all those changes to the forked repository on GitHub. Now if I go and reload the page, you can see the message that the branch is in even with the master branch of the original repository owner. So this is how you will update your forked repository. So I hope that it is clear. So the two things that we essentially do is pushing an existing repository of your own project from your command line onto GitHub. And when you're essentially working on an open source project of which someone else is owner and you have forked the repository, then you need to execute these set of commands in order to stay updated with the original repository. So I hope that was clear to everyone. So with that, we come to the end of the hands-on session. So if you have any queries, you can ask in the chat section. If you want to repeat if you want me to repeat anything, or if you have any queries, you can ask them in the chat section.
Yeah, sure. So we have some questions. Okay. So before that, let me just sure, great. So let's go to some questions we have. So a lot of people are asking about, like, I was checking up your post about the GitHub Copilot program. So, like, according to you, what it is, like, can you share some insights on, because you recently got into it, right? So yeah. So would you please do that?
Yeah, sure. So let me do that while sharing my screen itself, and I will explain and give a brief about GitHub Copilot program. So GitHub Copilot is an AI that has been created in collaboration of GitHub with OpenAI. So what that does is actually is whenever you are in a software development environment, it is often seen as a best practice to have a pair programmer, which is called pair programming in agile environment. So there are two developers who sit together, and one will code and the other will guide you in the development environment. So one will help you in debugging if you encounter any bugs or compilation errors or whatever it may be, and the primary one will be coding, and he will be developing the software. So it can be seen as a pair programming environment. So the idea of GitHub Copilot is actually to bring you an artificial intelligence powered pair programmer, which will help you in creating clean software code, following all the best practices. So now that we have already created our repository, let me go there and show a small demo of that for you. As you can see, now the file is empty. Now I'm going to write some function headers and comments, and the rest of the thing will be automatically filled by the AI. So for example, if I write a function that says double sort, and it takes an array as argument. So as you can see, the rest of the code is shown in gray, and it is automatically populated by GitHub Copilot. So if you press on tab, it will autocomplete and the function will be filled in for you. So this comes pretty handy, and it will save so much of your time when you're coding, and if you want to complete your project and speed up the process of software development, it will come very much handy, and it will save so much of your time. So you just need to type the function header or a descriptive comment, and the GitHub Copilot AI will do the rest of the things for you. So for example, if I want to define a class, say of linked list, and I want to perform various operations on linked list data structure. So it will start suggesting automatic codes for me, and I just need to press tabs in order to complete it. Sometimes it takes a long time to give you a suggestion, or sometimes it can also give you wrong code for whatever you have asked it. So since it's not 100% perfect and efficient, you can say it's like 75 to 80% of the time it gives the correct suggestion for you whenever you are writing your code. So that is what essentially GitHub Copilot does. So I think you have got an overview of what it actually does.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and excellently explained with a demo. Okay, so that says it all. Okay, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's. We have a question here. So it's this question.
So how to upload SQL table on GitHub that was already created before on SQL. So when you are in your SQL environment and you're using anything such as MySQL or Postgres or anything, you can export the tables that are present in that particular database using certain SQL commands. So when you have exported that um, tables inside that set of database, it will create .sql file. So those files can be stored in a local directory. As I showed in my demo, there was a test directory that was already created, and like that you can create your directory and you can add all those .sql files into that directory. Now, in order to have Git recognize that and track your changes, you need to execute all those commands such as Git Init in order to initialize it as an empty Git repository, and then you need to follow all those things that we have seen in this demo in order to push it to the remote environment such as GitHub.
Thank you so much for doing that. So next question is this.
Is it necessary to have knowledge of Git before using GitHub? So this question actually has two types of answers. First, I will say yes and also no, because when I talked about GitHub, so GitHub essentially uses Git as its version control system. So if you do not have the knowledge of Git, then also you can work with GitHub because you can upload all your files and track all your changes and can do all that on the browser itself. Uh, Let me show it to you. So, so instead of pushing and pulling all the changes from your local environment, you can add the files here itself. So here there's an option of upload files. So it will automatically do all the Git add and commit commands internally by GitHub. So GitHub will take care of the commands that it needs to do while working with Git. So it will do that internally for you. So if you do not have knowledge of Git also, you can upload the files directly from your local environment to GitHub. So that is the kind of no answer to the question. So where you can upload it from the local environment. For some of the changes or some of the tasks that you do on Git and GitHub, you do need to have certain basic understanding of how it works. So for example, the thing that I talked about, updating the fork repository and everything, that cannot be done from the browser end. So in order to do that, you need to have Git knowledge. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go to the next question. Okay, so this is
Yeah, okay. Where are Git files stored in Windows? So whether it's Windows or any operating system, Git files are stored, but they are not visible to our environment. So actually, they are by default hidden files. So if you are in a Windows environment, in the File Explorer, you will have an option called View menu on your top. So when you go to that view and if you uncheck the hidden items checkbox, you can see a .git directory created in your project environment. So that will contain all the files that Git uses in order to track your changes of the project. So by default, they are hidden. So that is the answer. Does it require to have Git desktop? Yeah, so if you do not want to execute the Git commands on a command line environment, and if you find it to be difficult, cumbersome, then you can move on to Git desktop software. So it is a GUI based environment where you can easily interact with the software, and you can do all the things that we have discussed in this demo. Instead of command line, you can do all that on Git desktop itself. Mm, Can you also explain how issues work in projects? I'm quite new to open source environment. How issues work in projects? Okay, so issues are basically created for various purposes, such as bug fixes or improvements to the projects. So suppose if you are working on an open source project, and if you see that it has so many bugs, and you have found some bugs in that project. So now you want the owner of the repository to know that it has certain bugs. So for that, you will create a new issue stating the bugs and the steps that they need to follow in order to reproduce the bug in their environment. So, for example, if you have seen an HTML project and the button form is not working, for example, so you can show them how you got to know about that bug, and you can explain it to them in the issue section. And if you know the solution, you can approach and tell them that I want to work on this certain issue that I have found, and I will fix it for you. So then the repo administrator will respond to you stating that you can go ahead and work on that issue. So that is one. That is bug fixes. Now, if you are an user of that open source software, suppose for example you are a user of Firefox web browser and you want certain features to be added to Firefox web browser. So you will go to the Firefox repository on GitHub and go to the issue section, and you will add and you will state the feature that you want to add to Firefox. So, and then after that, the repo admin will respond to how that feature will be added in the coming versions of the software. So essentially, issues are created for bug fixes and feature improvements of the software. So
Thank you so much. And
yeah.
so thank you so much for doing that. We'll take the next questions, but before that, I have a question from my side. Okay, so you have been part of a lot of communities and you are an open source enthusiast. You have done a lot. So how has been your experience up till now? So this is kind of a very experience based question. Like, how was your experience? How has been for you?
Yeah, okay, sure. So when I got into open source, the way in which I got into it was actually very different. So before 2 years, I did not know what was open source and what were the programs that offered an initiative to help contributors and new beginners in their open source journey. Then through LinkedIn, I got to know about various opportunities such as Hacktoberfest and Hacking Codes, and now DevIncept and Girl Script Summer of Code. So there are so many opportunities that I got to know from LinkedIn. So there are so many open source programs on a small scale and on a large scale as well that will help you in gaining experience in the open source world. So when you're starting with open source, it's not necessary that you have to be so much experienced in the technology that you're going to work. It's absolutely fine if you are a beginner. And since you have the other collaborators with you, such as the mentors and the project administrators itself, so they will all guide you in the process, and it will be very beneficial for you, and it will help you to gain experience when you move on further in your open source journey. So till now, it has been very exciting, and I got to learn more, and I got to get connections from various developers around the world. I got to meet so many people. So those were all the added advantages that I got along with the coding that I did during the open source program.
Wonderful answer, Vaidhyanathan, and that's quite an answer. And thank you so much and it speaks for yourself, like your experience. So let's go to the next question. This question is from Ria.
So what is the difference between Git fetch and Git pull? So that is an excellent question actually. So when we saw about updating the forked repository, you saw me using the command git fetch upstream. So when you are actually pulling the changes from a remote upstream environment, then you use the fetch command. That means when you're fetching from a stream of a remote environment, you use the fetch command. So suppose now we have actually created the test directory. Let me show you actually here. So now we're on GitHub. I'm going to add a new file. Okay. Now on GitHub, I'm going to add a new file. Let's call it readme.md. Okay. So now this file is created in my GitHub environment. I will commit the new file. Now the committed changes is present only on GitHub and it's not present in my local environment. So now in order to sync the GitHub project present here on GitHub to my local environment where I have that test directory, what I will do is I will use the git pull command. So pull command is used to pull all the changes from the remote environment of the same repository of which your local repository is a part of. So as we first linked the local repository of yours to the GitHub, so in order to get all the changes from the remote GitHub environment to your local environment, you will use the git pull command. So if I use git pull, you can see that a new file called readme.md was added on GitHub. Now that has been pulled into my local environment and you can see the readme file here. So this is the use of git pull command. But when we updated the fork repository at that time, in order to fetch all the changes from the upstream, we used the git fetch command, which will fetch and pack all those changes, and then we merged it with our local environment. So that is the difference between git fetch and git pull command. I hope that answered the question. So next, can you explain what Git LFS? I'm not sure what you're trying to ask the question. What is LFS actually? Okay, anyway, what is staging area? So staging area is so when you have added all the files to the directory and you have initialized it to be a Git repository. After doing that, the changes that you have made should be known to Git. So Git should know that it has to track all these certain set of files that you are adding, right? So in order to make Git understand that you have to track all these set of files, you will say Git add and the name of the files. So when you say Git add and all the files that you want to Git to track, so that is called the staging area, where you stage all those files into that particular area where Git will track all those files. So that is called as staging area. Please also tell us about fetch upstream. So yeah, so when I told you about that forked repository example, so what we essentially did was we added the upstream. So when we added the upstream, we gave the link of the original repository. So what that will do is it'll link the fork repository of yours in the local environment to the remote repository of that particular owner whose repository you forked from there. Okay, so the git remote add upstream will add that upstream. So now once you have set that upstream, whatever changes that has been made to the original repository should be reflected in your own forked repository. So in order to do that, you used the git fetch upstream command. So git fetch upstream will fetch all those changes and it will collect and keep it in a pack. Once it has done that, we need to merge all the collected changes that were given by the fetch. So after we used the fetch upstream command, all those changes were collected in a pack. Now we need to merge all those changes with our local environment's master branch. So in order to do that, we did git merge upstream master. So from the upstream, the fetched changes will be merged with the local environment's master branch. So that is what essentially we did. I hope that answered the question. So what causes conflicts in branch and how can we resolve it? So suppose you're making changes from your local environment, and at the same time you're making changes from your remote environment, or somebody with whom you're collaborating is also working on the same file. Suppose readme.md file is there and you're working on it in your local environment, and you have pushed the changes, and also someone else is working on that and on the same readme file, and they are pushing the changes. At some time, the sync is not successful between the two instances, and a merge conflict, something called merge conflict occurs. So when the merge conflict occurs, there are so many options for you. Like you can accept the incoming change, or you can accept both the changes that happen to the file. So one change is that you have made to the file, and another changes someone else has made that change to your readme.md file. So if you want to accept both the changes, you can accept both the changes, or you can accept only your change and you can neglect the change made by the other person. So whenever merge conflicts occur, you have these two options of merging both the changes or merging only one of the changes that occur to the same file. So that is that. Is it better to use those commands in VS Code or Git Bash? So that depends totally upon you. It's your choice. You can use both Git Bash or your normal command line environment or your VS Code command line environment. So it totally depends on you. Once Git is globally set in your local system, it can be accessed from anywhere. So how to connect my system Microsoft SQL Server to the code so that we can host it on GitHub. So what you're essentially asking is, you have your full stack application that needs to contact with a database such as Microsoft SQL Server. So you're asking about how to connect to the database. That is actually somewhat off topic to the session, but still you can explore about that on.
Yeah, sure. Let's wait.
Yeah.
Let's take another question.
Yeah, sure. After fixing bug on open source project, how we approach them to make changes to their project? So yeah, sure. So once you have told them that this is the bug and you are going to contribute for it, they will assign you to that issue, and you will start working on that issue from your side. So once you have done the changes and you have fixed the bug from your side, you will push the changes from your side. So when you push all the changes from your side, in the repository end, a button called pull request will be enabled. So when the pull request button is enabled, you can click on that, and you can describe the changes that you have made and the changes that you have made in order to fix that bug. So once that repository administrator is satisfied with your code and the way in which you have solved the bug, he will accept that pull request. So the meaning of pull request is you are requesting them to pull your changes to their repository. So that is the meaning of pull request. So when you do the pull request, they can either accept it or reject it, or they can suggest from changes that you can make in order for them to accept the changes. So once they accept that pull request, the changes that you made in order to fix that bug will automatically be merged with that master branch of the remote repository. Yeah, this is kind of a repeated question, merge conflicts. So as I said, there are two options. You can accept the incoming changes, or you can accept both the changes that were made to the same file whenever merge conflict occurs. Can we use Atom instead of VS Code? Yeah, that totally depends on your choice. Whichever text editor you want to use, you can use Atom or VS Code or Sublime Text or Vim or Emacs or whatever you want to use, you can use that. How to update readme file? So if you want to update any file, you can do that from the browser itself or from your local environment. So if you want to do it from the browser, you can click on this edit button and you can update the readme file and you can push the changes and you can pull those changes into your local environment. Or else you can do the changes to readme file in your local environment and push those changes to the browser. So there are two options.
That's great. And just like that's all with the questions. And thanks for being so patient and also like explaining everything to the point. Okay, thanks for doing that. And to everyone who's watching this live on the stream right now, I want to tell them that like I posted a wrong link that was for a previous session, but I have again posted a new link. So make sure I'm showing that new link here. So this is the link. You need to kind of click on the link, register, and I have also certain queries like all of the people are asking about quiz and all. So the people who are going to fill the attendance form are also going to get the certificate. That's everyone who is filling the form. And you will going to give emails, right? So on that emails, you will also be sent all the quiz links, okay? So the quiz links would be sent to your email, okay? And there is no link. There is just one link that will be shared in this session for all the sessions, which is going to be held here on this channel, okay? So the link, I'm again sharing the link for the new ones. So just register, just fill in your attendance and you will get your certificate. And also you'll get a chance, you will get an email for the quiz, okay? And then it will have the quiz link, okay? What type of quiz? You will definitely get it once you get the mail, okay? I cannot reveal that. So just check your mails once after filling the form. You'll get a mail from DevIncept and you'll have the quiz link in it. I have shared the link once again. Please check the link and fill in the details. And over to you, Vaidhyanathan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this amazing session. We really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed it, and we all learned a lot from you. And you definitely deserve to be here, to be a part of the speakers panel. And you had an amazing open source journey, and also you are also being accepted to the co-pilot program as well of GitHub. So make sure you pass on all the updates. And to let you know, everyone, the LinkedIn handle of Vaidhyanathan is there in the description box. So you can do check it out. If you have any questions pending or if you need to ask him anything, you can just hit him up on LinkedIn. He is quite active. He'll reach out to you. And also Vaidhyanathan, any last words you want to say before we wrap up this session? Like how?
Yeah, sure. So first of all the best and congratulations to all the participants of DCP. And I hope you will have a lot of learnings during this program. And first of all, most importantly, don't consider this as a competition. It's a collaboration. You will get to know about more people from your industry, and you will get to connect with so many different people, and you will have an amazing learning journey. And last but not least, thank you, DevIncept, for this opportunity. And I'm glad that I got this opportunity. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And I think that you're also one of our program admins. He's here for a session, guys, but he's also one of our program admins for, and he's going to be helping the contributors, and he's working with the mentors. So kudos to you, Vaidhyanathan, and we have some good comments coming from the audience. So let's just flash all these comments so that you'll feel better, you'll feel good. Okay, so here's one.
So I'm glad that the session was helpful. Thank you, everyone.
So a lot of people are, yeah, this is also one more good thing. So that's it. That's it for this session, and we'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And Vaidhyanathan, being an amazing speaker, he not only explained you the concepts, but actually like kind of gave you some hands-on sessions. Being very patient, he also answered your doubts. So make sure you reach out to him definitely after this session if you want to ask him anything. As I said, he's quite active on LinkedIn. He'll help you out. And thank you all for the love and support you've been giving to DevIncept. We have awesome sessions on all weekends. On Sunday, tomorrow also, we have 2 sessions planned for you all. So make sure you attend tomorrow as well. All of these sessions you will have an opportunity to like win something, like win some swags. Okay. So make sure you don't come just with the intention of swags, but actually come with an intention to learn something and to take away something home. And in this COVID times, let's be like productive and learn new things. And this all is all for you. It's all for you. It's all organized for you so that in this hard times, in this pandemic times, you guys can learn and you can upskill yourself. So make sure you join us guys tomorrow as well, and do join all our social media handles. Like they are given in the description box. Our Telegram, which is like rapidly growing, we have crossed more than 1,000 members on Telegram channel we have. And also don't forget to follow on us on LinkedIn as well. Like we just hit 6,000 followers. All like we are very grateful to our audience, whomsoever is supporting DevIncept, our cause, whatever we are doing. And we'll see you guys in tomorrow's session. Till then, take care of yourself, and you also, Vaidhyanathan, take care of yourself and your loved ones. And thank you so much for doing it. And let's meet tomorrow. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye all.